the season review done, it is time for grading the 2024 version of the Clemson Tigers, position group by position group, offense, defense, special teams, the whole nine. And then at the end, we'll give an offense and defense MVP and an offense and defense breakout player, according to myself and Jordan. Get in the comment section, guys. Give your letter grades for each individual position group with us as we go along, and we'll see whether we agree or disagree. So we'll have a little bit of fun with it. We're going to start off with the defensive side of the ball because these grades are going to be a little bit lower than the offensive side of the ball.
Probably.
So starting off, I'll start off with the defensive tackle group. I went with a B minus.
That's mine.
I think there was a lot of good in that group this past season. We had some injuries, obviously, that hampered a couple guys. When you think about DeMonte Capehart and some other guys that were limited at times. But overall, I think they performed okay. So I went with a B minus. Probably could have went a little bit lower, but I was feeling generous. So I'll go B minus.
Yeah, I'm with you. We had high expectations for them, and they did not meet them in a lot of ways, but not and not necessarily just because they didn't play well. Yeah, like you mentioned, it was injuries and stuff like that. But obviously taking Peter Woods out of the equation for a lot of the year and putting him at defensive end, and obviously him getting hurt at different points in the year certainly hurt. But teams weren't like running up the gut on you.
Right. It was the edge.
It was the edge. So but the one of the things that was different about this year as opposed to previous years was you just weren't getting a lot of pressure from that group. Like you didn't have a lot of talented interior pass rushers. Like they just, especially with Peter Woods not being there, like you just don't have a guy that's what DeMonte Capehart, when he was like he has some pass rush moves, but he is very much a space eater, dominant. Like he doesn't have a whole ton of moves.
He was having a really good season up until that ankle injury, and he never really recovered from that.
Right. And Peyton Page and Trey Williams, like really, really good football players, but they're not like overly special pass rushers. Although shout out to Trey Williams, he got 2 sacks in the Texas game. He's now at Michigan. But that was not their game. And so you weren't able to get a whole lot of interior pressure, and which means you couldn't collapse the pocket without sending extra guys. Like that just that's something that when Clemson defenses have been great, that's something that they were they got really good production out of. When you had the Brian Brzezis and the Tyler Davises, and you had like those guys could get interior pressure. You just didn't get much of that. So I went with B minus for them. Good, but not good enough, I guess. Probably
the theme for Clemson this year. All right, Jordan, what'd you think of the edge position, the defensive ends? What do you grade that group?
I'm gonna go D to D plus. The only reason it's that high is because of TJ Parker. Like he's incredible. But
yeah, it's funny because if you could see my notes right now, I wrote my letter grade down and then I put in parentheses, not TJ Parker.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect way to sum it up. Like not TJ Parker, D plus. Like they just were not good enough. Didn't get a lot of pass rush from anybody. I think Jaheim Lawson took some strides. I'll say that much. I think he did get better as the season went on. But beyond that, you had nothing. You got nothing out of that group behind TJ. And you couldn't set the edge. You were too small. Didn't have any guys that could, they just weren't. They could get vertical at times, but if obviously when teams are running stretch zone at you, you're not trying to get vertical. You're trying to
to set the edge.
Yeah, you got to move
which
laterally.
Was impossible for anybody outside of TJ Parker, apparently.
Yeah. So they literally Texas's game plan was run run away from TJ.
Yeah, run whatever side TJ Parker's on, we're running stretch zone the opposite way. And it worked every single time to the tune of almost 300 yards rushing. The story of Clemson's defense this year. So I will agree with you, Jordan. D at best. Again, parentheses, not TJ Parker. So if TJ Parker somehow stumbles along this, not you. Not you. You're fine.
Not you.
Just keep doing what you're doing.
Keep doing what you're doing, TJ.
Yeah. We got you some help via the transfer portal, so we'll be good. All right, moving on right along to the linebacker group. Jordan, this is a group, and we've talked about it on the channel before, but this is a group that has regressed under the tutelage of a Wes Goodwin. And it's really unfortunate because the talent there has been very high in recent years. I mean, we've gone into a couple seasons now where we thought that we had one of the best linebacker groups in the country, and it never manifests on the field. And I'm not attacking those guys personally, so don't get me wrong, but when you saw the run fits this season, when you saw the poor angles, when you saw that we couldn't cover a wheel route to save our life, when you saw the missed tackles, it was a bad group this year. And I know they had their moments where they played really well, but for the most part, they underperformed greatly with the talent that was there. And there was a couple bright spots. Obviously, Sammy Brown came on towards the end of the season, started getting a lot more playing time. He's clearly going to be a big part of this defense moving forward. I think Barrett Carter had, another somewhat disappointing season, and I love that guy. He's a Clemson dude. There's none better as a ambassador of Clemson University, and I think he's going to have a successful NFL career. So don't get me wrong, but I think he was put in bad situations by his defensive coordinator, and that's just how I feel. But that group, I think, greatly underperformed. I think they're probably a D+, C- ish, somewhere in that ballpark when it comes to the linebacker core. Where you got them at?
Yeah, I'm with you. D+. I'm gonna go D+ because we had such high expectations for them. Especially for the starters. I mean, having Barrett Carter and Wade Woodaz coming back was huge. The addition of Sammy Brown, and you were, again, we did have questions about the emergence of some of the younger guys, and that just never happened. And so you had your two starters who already weren't playing up to their best that we've seen in their careers, having to play a ton of snaps. The only thing that keeps them from being worse is Sammy was really good, and when he played, good things happened largely. So, and that gives you some reason for optimism. It didn't help that, and it wasn't all just some of it was unlucky. Kobe McLeod tearing his ACL, I don't think I'm not a huge Kobe McLeod fan, but him being the first one to run out there. That was for a reason, and you don't have him. Yeah, that messes with your depth, and you had to play some guys at times.
He was clearly third on the depth chart when it comes to linebackers.
Yeah. So, that was unfortunate, but at the end of the day, they just did not play up to the the standard. They poor run fits, honestly, some soft tackling at times, and it never really got better unless Sammy was on the field.
Yeah. And anytime at that position, when you have the experienced guys that we had in that room, when a freshman is your best player and your leading tackler in most games, that's not good.
No.
Sammy is a freak. That's great for Sammy Brown.
Yeah, he's a freak, but
coming into the season, you thought you were going to get more from a Barrett Carter and a Wade Woodaz.
Yeah, you didn't think you would have to ask him to come in the situations that he had to.
Right. But luckily we got that guy on our roster, and he answered the call this past season, and he will continue going forward. All right, Jordan, switching gears, cornerback room. Where do you have the cornerbacks grading out this season?
Definitely going to be one of the higher ones on the defense. I'm going to go B. I'm going to go B+. Kind of that that range. They certainly had their moments, but you didn't always get the best play out of them, but
Right.
they were largely your most consistent position on defense. I would say you had guys that could cover. The emergence of Ashton Hampton was really good. And Avion Terrell, there's an argument going on in the chat about him. I thought Avion Terrell all over the course of the season was pretty good. Now he had his moments where he didn't play well. The playoff game, I think he had one of his worst games, but
He did.
I don't think it was like someone was implying like it was a lack of effort or anything. Like, no, I mean he's an undersized corner. He plays as well with his God-given body, physical abilities as I've seen come through Clemson, because that's a guy that you typically don't recruit to play corner, because he doesn't have super rangy, he's not super rangy as far as his body. Like, he can run, but he just plays a lot bigger than his size. But again, he's still limited. He's 5'11", if that much. Like, he's just not your typical boundary corner. Like, that's just not what he is. And so he's going to get beat sometimes. He's going to miss tackles. But like I said, the emergence of Ashton Hampton was really, really positive. I was disappointed with kind of Jaden Lucas's play at times, but I thought he was better than some people try to give him credit for. I think injuries have taken a lot out of him over his career. But again, I don't think the corners were your biggest problem in most of the games. I think probably if my biggest critique was probably in run support at times. Like, they just weren't always there. It wasn't always because the times where you did fit the run well, sometimes you still gave up a decent gain because the corners weren't where they were supposed to be in run support. So I don't know. I'm higher on the corners than I saw some people say. I saw like a C for the corners. I think that's a little harsh. I think, especially given the lack of help they got from the front seven a lot of the year.
Yeah, look, they were, to your point, they were far from perfect this season. But I think Clemson's in a good spot when it comes to corners. Did Avian Terrell have some issues towards the end of the season, specifically in that playoff game? Sure, he didn't have his greatest game. But I think when you look at the totality of what he put on the field this past season, he put together a pretty good performance, right? Ashton Hampton came on at the end of the season, started looking really good. You mentioned Jaden Lucas had his struggles. And to your point, I think that's due to a lot of the injuries that he sustained. And he's just not being consistently on the field, right? So that development is affected, right? But again, I had them graded out as a B. I think that's a fair grade for the cornerbacks. It wasn't a stellar year for them, but they were much better than the front seven of that defense this year. So I don't think they deserve too much hate. Last position group on the defensive side of the ball, and then we'll switch over to offense. The safeties. I had the safeties graded out at a B+. I thought they played really well this season. R.J. Mickens was probably the highlight of the defense, especially on the back end. When it came to this season, that guy left it all out on the field. I think he made himself some significant money this year, and he proved to be just a savvy vet back there that kind of was the air traffic controller, if you will, making sure everybody's in position, and he stepped up in a big way. So I had the safeties graded out as a B+. Where'd you have them at?
I'm kind of right there at B. So like I think they were fairly consistent. I think one of the things that was you mentioned R.J. Mickens. That's a guy that's going to be almost impossible to replace. I'm going to miss him greatly. But I think you had some struggles early in the year, kind of figuring out, kind of what you wanted to do there. With Khalil Barnes moving from nickel to safety and kind of moving him around. but on the whole, like your safety play was solid, and again, you didn't have too many games where you were just flat out getting beat over the top. Like that did not happen a lot this year. There were some probably their worst. I think the worst game for the safeties was probably I want to say Pitt. I don't think they played particularly well. That's probably the one that stands out to me. I don't think they played that was probably their worst game, especially when you were playing a backup quarterback. They were able to get some chunk plays on you. But like I think they were largely solid over the course of the year. I do have some questions, about that room moving forward, because you're going to be relying on so much youth next year.
A lot of talent, but a lot of unproven guys.
Yeah. So, but this year, I thought your secondary was probably overall was your best group on defense, and that's not normally what you say about a Clemson defense. And it wasn't for just that. Oh my God, your front seven was good, and your secondary was just better. It was your front seven was pretty lacking in a lot of areas, and by consequence, your secondary had to play a lot better in order for your defense to be even somewhat competent at times. So that's the disappointing thing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, shifting gears to, well, I guess let's give an overall grade of the defense. Where'd you have the defense grading out as a whole?
As a whole, and this probably doesn't. If you were to relate the grades to like a number average, it would probably be higher than what I'm about to say. But just grading the defense as they played this year as a whole, it's got to be like a D. They were not very good. The run defense was inexcusable. I can't in good conscience even say C, because you met certain standard. You kind of met the standards,
right?
You just flat out didn't. And, so D plus. I'll say D plus.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they're definitely in that D plus, maybe C minus. But again, your run defense was so bad that you kind of have to put them down in the D range. So I think D plus is a pretty fair one. Let's go ahead and shift gears to the offensive side of the ball, starting off with the offensive line group. This is a group coming into the season, Jordan. We didn't really know what to expect. We knew, yes, Dabo Swinney went out and got a Matt Luke, a guy that's elite, absolutely elite at his position group, which is offensive line. Already mentioned, former head coach. I mean, the guy is just probably the best offensive line coach in the country that you could have went out and got at that point in time, and Dabo goes and gets him, right? But again, our offensive line had been pretty bad. So our conversations all throughout spring and fall camp were, how much can we really expect them to improve in year one under Matt Luke? Well, the answer was quite a bit. I think the offensive line was clearly not elite. They still have a lot to work on. They have a lot to grow. But, I mean, can you give the offensive line anything less than a B plus? I mean, I know in situations they weren't great. I didn't quite want to go to an A, so I settled on a B plus. Very happy with the improvements that were made under year one of Matt Luke. We only lose one offensive lineman off of this roster. So you got 4 of the 5 starters coming back, plus guys, your 6th and 7th guy played a whole lot. Elijah Thurman, who, is going to be a guy in the rotation as well this season. You got a lot of hope there on the offensive line. And I think year 2 under Matt Luke is going to get a lot better, but I was super happy with the results on the field in year 1. I don't think any Clemson fan expected them to improve to the point in which they did. So I settled on a B plus. Where you got him?
I think that's a good grade, and I think if you grade on a curve, you could probably convince me to go A, because ultimately, like, especially in the first half of the season, this offensive line was playing as well as anybody's.
Yeah.
Honestly, even in the first game against Georgia, I mean, yeah, you couldn't run the football, but Klubnik did not get pressured a ton in that game. He was just kind of indecisive, and the receivers just flat out weren't getting open at times. So like, your offensive line wasn't even your biggest weakness against Georgia. And then, obviously in the games following that, they were pretty stellar. You were running the football well at that point. And Klubnik had, time to throw, and he was able to create, even when he didn't. There was a lot of improvements. And I think towards the back half of the season, there was a dip, but I think it was, injury related, with, obviously you had guys go out of the lineup. Walker Parks, got hurt. Marcus Tate got hurt. Tristan Lay got hurt. So like you were getting into your depth. I mean, Elijah Thurman comes and starts his first game against Pitt, and he goes out in the first play of the game. Like, and then all of a sudden you're having to move Blake Miller to left tackle and do all this offensive line shuffle. I think that affected kind of how they played towards the end of the year, and you couldn't really run the ball as well. But overall, just the improvements that they made, I think was honestly they exceeded expectations. So I say B plus, but grading on a curve probably get them to an A.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you probably could bump them up to maybe an A minus if you grade on a bit of a curve. But again, settled on B plus for them. All right, Jordan, moving right along. Tight end group. Where'd you grade the tight ends at for the 2024 season?
Tight ends, I went with A minus, B plus, A minus, kind of there. Thought you had a good 1-2 punch with Jake Brenningstool. I think Jake at times didn't play his best, and he still left a lot to be desired as a blocker at times. But the emergence of Olsen Pat Henry was really exciting. I'm excited about this group in general. You didn't have to burn Christian Bentaker's red shirt. So I think your tight end has played really well largely this year. I mean, they were not a lot of the problem, and when you did have problems. So I went B plus. That's the thing. That's where I'm going to go with. I think they were pretty good.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The emergence of Olsen, you mentioned it. The emergence of Olsen Pat Henry, I think, was the highlight of the season in that tight end group. Not taking anything away from
Jake Brenningstool.
Thank you. Good Lord. Not taking anything away from Jake Brenningstool. Obviously he set the record this year. He had a really good season.
Yeah, he had a good year.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone saw Olsen Pat Henry kind of taking the steps forward that he did this season. Not only in he didn't get a ton of catches this season and really to display that side of his game, but I mean the steps that he took forward in the blocking and just being a well-rounded tight end, I didn't see it coming personally. But excited that dude's on our roster and he's going to be a contributor going forward. So I think B plus is a pretty good grade for the tight end group. Moving right along to the running back room. This is an interesting room, right?
Yeah.
Because really outside of Phil Maffa, there is nothing. You got your 1,100 plus yard back in Phil Maffa. I think he had a really great season, 8 touchdowns on the season. Cade Klubnik, obviously the second leading rusher on the team. That's not great, right? And he's not really what you would call a running quarterback, right? He'll use his legs, but he's not a guy looking to scramble a whole bunch, right? And then outside of those two, I mean, Jay Haynes, not very much run, and then behind him, pretty much nothing, right? Obviously, Jay Haynes hurts himself going into the playoffs, but he wasn't playing much anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really hard to grade this room. Phil Maffa had an amazing first part of the season, obviously battling the injury, his shoulder injury that he has to have surgery on in the second half of the season really hampered him. I think he would have had a much bigger season statistically. I think he would have been a lot more effective down the stretch. I mean, how many snaps did he play in the playoff game? What, like 5?
Felt like 5. Like
It didn't feel like he played very much, right?
He was
When you're moving a
done.
wide receiver to running back, like you got problems, right? So,
Yeah.
No, I don't think any disrespect to Phil Maffa and the way that he performed, but as a whole, when you're looking at that running back room, I think they probably graded out as, maybe a C plus on the season. Just nothing after Phil Maffa, and
I'm going to go
a problem.
Yeah, I'm going to go even a little bit lower. I'm going C minus because Phil Maffa was very, very good, and he was a warrior playing through a lot of pain for basically the entire season until he couldn't do it anymore. And the fact that you weren't able to get any of these running backs in a position to be more bigger contributors towards the end of the year and basically forcing Phil Maffa out there. And using him in ways that didn't make sense considering his injury, like that, the running back room I feel like was pretty poorly managed. Who that falls on, like I'm not going to discuss that but like that's the fact of the matter is the room was just not they were not in a good position this year, and they didn't put those guys in very good positions this year. So, and it was funny because then, you get to the playoff game and all of a sudden you have Jarvis Green, who you didn't see at all, catching a touchdown pass. And then, you move Adam Randall to running back. He breaks off a 40-yard run. And you're like, okay, so, you had these answers. You potentially had some answers, and you did not do anything to kind of get them ready, during the season when it was clear that Phil Maffa, like, it's not like his torn labrum was going to get better over the course of the year. Like, why wasn't there sort of a plan looking ahead in motion of, okay, we're not going to be able to lean on this guy as much, in the back half of the season. There's just no way.
And one of the most frustrating things is, like, Dabo goes out there every press conference and, like, acts like everybody's crazy for questioning Phil Maffa's health. Like, well, we watch a lot of football games. Like, we don't know football to the level that you do or any of your coaches or players do, probably, but we can clearly see that something's wrong with Phil Maffa. Like, we have to pivot to someone else, and they just never did. And the worst part is that's an indictment on everybody else in that room currently.
Yeah.
So,
and
Gideon Davis, we need you to come through, brother.
Well, okay. And one thing selfishly, is this probably gave some of our fan base a better appreciation of Will Shipley.
Yeah, for sure.
It was nice to have two backs that could give you, a high level of play, and not having him this year, and honestly, if you had your NIL situation in a better spot, like maybe you could have, like, maybe if you had reorganized and done the things that you did to put yourself in a better position for player retention, like last year, you could have potentially gotten Will Shipley back for his senior year.
Yeah,
and he's doing his thing.
Or you could have got a Trevor Etienne.
Yeah, could have gone into the portal.
You probably could have gotten him if you had enough NIL money. Yeah. Not 100% sure, obviously, but it could have happened. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly
That's my Will Shipley defense because he got a lot of flack.
he did catch a lot of heat by the Clemson
Yeah.
fans,
Yeah.
uncharacteristically for a player of his level. Like
Yeah.
usually, Clemson fans are, very gracious to guys of his caliber, but Shipley rubbed a lot of people the wrong way several times at his time in Clemson. I still love the guy. I think he was a great Clemson Tiger, but he definitely caught he caught some heat rounds from the fan base at numerous points in times in his career.
Passionate player, and he was
Very
a
passionate.
leader. He was a leader, and that
Very
was
passionate. You
know
you cannot question that guy's will to win.
yeah.
He wants to win football games, and he is willing to do anything and everything to try to make that happen. So
Yeah.
you could never question his effort or his will to win. That's for sure. But
Yeah.
shout out to him. He's hopefully he gets some bigger opportunities in the NFL than he's getting right now.
Yeah.
All right, moving on, Jordan. Wide receiver is next on the list. Where you got him ranked, or where you got him graded?
Yeah, wide receiver. I got to go A- to A. This was this was arguably, one of the best groups on the team. They had their moments where they didn't play as well, but they were very much like largely met expectation. We had really high hopes for this group, and they met them. With the true freshmen, wide receivers coming in. The only drawback was you didn't get them going sooner. You didn't play him really at all against Georgia, but and of course Antonio Williams being Antonio Williams was great.
Man,
You had options this year, and that was fun. Like a guy couldn't play a game. Okay, well you still have Troy Stellato gave you really good snaps this year. Hate that he's gone. Cole Turner at times, like Cole Turner, people hate on Cole Turner, but he gave you some sparks this year. When
that's
the offense
that's because he's a Dabo Swinney legacy guy. That's why.
They just automatically it's PTSD, but like
I know.
not every legacy take that we've gotten is just does not deserve to play. I like Cole Turner, and I think he has a function in this offense. Like people don't. But if you're not like a stud, like true, like number one receiver type, like you're not good in the eyes of some people. But like
which is not
in the Virginia Tech game, that like his touchdown catch when your offense was doing absolutely nothing, he sparked that run and ultimately won that led to you winning that football game. Like he had created some explosive plays. I wasn't always just in the receiving game. He was a great. He's a great option. Reverses, jet sweeps. Like he's not like that. That is a function that he has. He's fast. Like people when they were saying he's the fastest football player on the team, wasn't like an exaggeration. Like that kid can run. He's a great athlete. Like he's a great person to have on the.
Look,
I didn't mean to turn this into a Cole Turner defense, but
no, and look,
I love Cole Turner.
It's like he doesn't have to be a starting wide receiver on the team to contribute significantly to the offense. He can have his pockets of where he helps the offense and produces. And I saw a couple people mention in the chat, we didn't even have Tyler Brown at all this season.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I landed on an A for this wide receiver group. I thought it was a complete 180 for that group. I called it in the offseason. You did as well. Antonio Williams was everything we hoped he would be coming off that full injury season, essentially, that he had. Tyler Brown's on that same. He's on the Antonio Williams plan right now. Breakout freshman year, hurt your sophomore year, and amazing junior year. Tyler Brown's going to do that next season. Just wait for it. A lot of people forgot how good Antonio Williams was until this year because he spent all last year hurt. Same thing for Tyler Brown. But Antonio Williams was just, like that dude, the fact that the 110 Society got it together enough to get him to come back, that's huge, man. You start looking at that wide receiver group, and I know this isn't a forward projecting grade. This year it's an A. But, outside of, this year being really special and the turnaround and the addition of those young freshman wide receivers and how they contributed in a big way, because without them, it wouldn't have been what it was this season. So shout out to TJ Moore, shout out to Brian Wesco. But the guy this season was Antonio Williams.
Yeah.
So I graded him an A, and looking forward, the future is extremely bright for that wide receiver group. Cade is going to have a lot of fun throwing to that group of wide receivers next season.
Yeah. And one thing that people don't, these guys this is still a really young group. Like they, outside of Antonio, I mean, he's going to be the grandpa of the group, but everybody else has tons of eligibility. Like, Brian Wesco and TJ Moore, they still have two more years minimum, but I think both of them are probably 3-and-done players because they're first round talents. But like Cole Turner, people forget he redshirt. He got his year back. Like he was basically a sophomore this year.
Right.
Like he's going to have a lot of eligibility. Really, he was basically a redshirt freshman this year because he redshirted in 2022, and then he got his 2023 back because he was out for a lot of it. Like,
so essentially, this was his first year wasting. This was his first time wasting a year of eligibility. So he's got 3 more seasons with the Tigers if he wants that.
And he can only get better. Like he doesn't have to be a starter for you, but he's a great utility player, great player that when you need an explosive play, like he's a guy that can go do that
as a change of pace to kind of do something different to the defense. While they're
turned this into a Cole Turner hype
while they're
show.
looking over here at TJ Moore and Antonio Williams, Cole Turner's over here doing something else, right? So can definitely be a contributing member.
Tyler Brown is going to get this year back, and he's got, and obviously we have our thoughts on how good Tyler Brown is. Like the wide receiver room is only looking up, and then the additions of Juju Preston and Marquise Henderson obviously are those guys won't have to come in and contribute right away. I said Marquise Henderson. I found out it's Marquez. It's Marquez.
Yeah, Marquez.
Yeah, I did not know that until not a press conference. It was a media thing. The early enrollees, it was like a Twitter or Instagram post that the football team made, that introducing the new enrollees. It's Marquez Henderson. I had no idea. I've only ever seen that name as Marquise, so I've been saying Marquise. So Marquez, if you're listening, which I know you are, then my fault. Anyway,
our bad. Yeah. All right. Last position on the offensive side of the ball, and then we'll transition to special teams. The quarterback position. I think this one's pretty easy, Jordan. I landed on an A. Cade Klubnik absolutely transformed into a completely different quarterback in 2024. That's the only thing you can say about it. Yeah. Clearly, whatever he did in the offseason, he talked about it a lot in the offseason about how he did various things to improve and how he talked to different people, and he did a new approach on things after talking to the Mannings and things like that. Clearly, whatever he did worked. He posted some great numbers this season: over 3,600 yards in passing, 36 touchdowns, another 7 on the ground, almost 500 yards rushing. Absolutely lights out, man. This is the Cade Klubnik that we thought we were getting when we recruited him out of Westlake, right? This is the guy. An absolute playmaker. He used his legs so much more this season, and not just for the sake of doing it, but he picked his moments, and it was really effective, and it changed how this offense looked in the eyes of a lot of defenses, because suddenly defenses really had to start respecting him for his athleticism. So I can't say enough good stuff about the guy. I think he's going to take another step forward next year. He's obviously going to be in the preseason Heisman talk just because of his numbers this past season. And you look at the quarterback landscape over college football. But I had him marked down as an A. Next year, hopefully he's an A+.
Yeah, I'm with you. And he exceeded all expectations that I had for him this year. And he got it. After that Georgia game, we had our questions. Like, yeah, he didn't play nearly as bad as his 2023 version of him probably would have in that game, but we were still like, okay, it seems like he's a little better than last year. Like he's certainly not turning the ball over the same way, and he looks a little more comfortable, but he still didn't look all that comfortable against Georgia, and we were wondering. But then obviously the App State game happened where he put together one of the best quarterback performances in school history,
right?
And then it just took off from there. And I think obviously the NC State game was the moment we were like, okay, yeah, this is a different player.
Right.
And wasn't perfect by any means, but he got better over the course of the season. When in a situation where he was losing guys, his offensive line was shifting. Obviously, he didn't get to lean on Phil Maffa as much, but he made things happen when things weren't. And I think that was the biggest growth from this season. And obviously, he put together a hell of a performance in the Texas game. I mean, he gave you a shot.
Right. That was his exclamation point on his 2024 season.
Yeah.
Was the way that he played against a really high level Texas team who had only allowed 4 passing touchdowns all season, and Cade just casually walks in to their stadium and throws 3 touchdown passes, and basically willing Clemson into a shot at winning that football game. Obviously, it didn't work out, but that was his exclamation point on the season.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a good jump off spring point, whatever you want to call it, for next year. And I can't be any more excited about getting to see him play. I can't say enough good things. And it's nice to just be comfortable where you are at quarterback for the first time in a long time.
Man, it feels good. Going into a season where you got a guy at quarterback. That feels good because it's been a while. It's been a while for the Tigers.
Yeah.
But all right, offensive overall grade, and then we're moving on to special teams, Jordan.
Yeah, offense overall grade gets a B+. They took massive steps from last year. And again, while it wasn't perfect, they gave you a lot, and they were your best position group. They were your best side of the ball by a significant amount. And and with a lot of this group coming back, I mean, you can only be, extremely excited to see what they could potentially be in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. B+ for the offense. Couldn't be more excited about the growth, not only from the players, but also Garrett Riley. I think you got to shout out Garrett Riley and the growth that he showed as a play caller in year 2 at Clemson. Obviously, he had more talent to work with, but I think he also grew. So shout out to him. All right, moving over to the special teams. Punter, D-, F.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, F for the punter.
Screw it. Yeah, I'm going F.
I mean, I don't know what else to say other than if we got a punt over 30 yards, we were like, oh, yeah, that's great. That's better than we normally get. He had a pretty decent season a year ago in 2023, but really regressed. And that's still a huge question mark going forward for Clemson because Jack Smith, who has been behind him for 3 seasons, not been able to beat him out, that's going to be the guy next year. I don't really feel good about that. So hopefully Clemson can address the punter situation at some point. But as far as the 2024 season goes, it was an F. It was abysmal.
Yeah. 100%. Got to go with you. F just was not. It was painful.
All right.
I'm glad the offense was much better this year because you would have had to watch a lot more punts.
Yeah. All
than
right.
we were expecting.
Kicker, what you got?
Kicker A- to an A. If we're grading the actual kicker,
The kicker,
obviously
yes.
his block.
We can grade the protection next if we want.
Yeah,
But I'm pretty sure everybody knows where that grade is. That's an F, along with the punter. The only special teams that might have been worse than the punter was the protection on kicks this season, and that's saying a lot. So,
yeah, definitely says a lot. But he made them when he did get good blocking. Nolan Hooser, he knocked him down, and obviously the kick to send Clemson to the playoff was and win the ACC. That was
he didn't.
I'm gonna remember that forever. So
yeah, I mean, historic kick in the ACC championship game, and to his credit, he didn't miss any kick that wasn't blocked.
Right.
So, can you really give him anything less than an A? I don't think so. He's a freshman kicker that walked in one of the most high pressure situations you could put a kicker in, and just winked at the sideline over there to Dabo Sweeney, and then just casually nailed a 56-yard walk-off field goal to give Clemson yet another ACC championship. So I think he gets an A. The protection's not his fault. So I don't think you can hold the 47 block field goals against him. Clearly, he's not the one up there blocking. He's just trying to kick the ball. So I agree with you. A for the kicker, F for the protection.
Yeah. F for protection. Just never should have that many block kicks in a season. Ridiculous.
Somebody in here said, Tig said anything lower than an F. If it was possible, that's what the protection would get.
Yeah. Terrible,
whatever worst grade there is.
If you have to move your kick 1 yard, another yard, and make it more difficult for your kicker, just so you have the opportunity to get the kick off,
right?
Like that's
Remind people that our protection was so bad that instead of kicking a 55-yard field goal to win the ACC championship game, we had to kick a 56-yard field goal, and they still got pressure.
Yep.
So good thing we did back it up a yard. It probably would have got blocked and returned for a touchdown. But I guess shout out to whoever made that call. But yeah, to your point, like enough said. You got to move your kicker back because you can't protect. I mean, better get it fixed this offseason. I can tell you that. Better be a point of emphasis in spring. I don't know who's setting the protection, who's teaching it, but it's wrong. Yeah. However you're teaching it, it's wrong. So big F there. Got to figure some things out. Let's move on to some season awards, Jordan. Like I said, we're going to do an offensive MVP, defensive MVP, and then a breakout for each side of the ball as well. Offensive MVP, who you got?
Pretty easy for me, K. Klubnik. He's most valuable. You don't have the season you do without him.
100%, yeah.
K. Klubnik.
I agree. I think that's the only way you could go there. K. Klubnik he was the guy, and he grew a ton this season. So obviously he's going to get the offensive MVP. Defensive MVP for me, R.J. Mickens. I think he was the guy that was overall on the defense the most consistent guy, game in, game out. You knew exactly what you were going to get, and he had a pretty spectacular season, I think. So R.J. Mickens is the MVP on the defensive side of the ball for me. Who do you got?
That's a really good pick. I'm going to go with T.J. Parker.
Yeah.
I think those two were just. I mean, those were your best defensive players this year overall. Just in terms of consistent play. T.J. first double-digit sack season since 2018 for Clemson. Enough said. Tons of tackles for loss. He had like 5 forced fumbles. I don't know if it was that much, but he broke the season record.
Yeah, it was crazy. He had an amazing season. I got no issues there. I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, offense breakout player.
That's going to be a tough one. I think there's there's two obvious ones, and then there's one that it was kind of off the radar.
Yeah.
It's because he didn't have a ton of effect in the stat sheet. But oh man, I'm gonna go with Bryant Wesco Jr., but slightly. Between him and TJ, it was right there. It was right there. But I think Bryant Wesco, I think he came on sooner, and I think that's that's why I have to give it to him.
Right. I see your struggle, especially towards the end of the season.
TJ certainly he had his
As Moore really got going, TJ Moore really got going. You saw like, oh, this dude's about to be special.
Yeah.
And can't wait to see the season he puts together. But I think if you're looking at the season as a totality, I think you got to go with Bryant Wesco, just because of the overall season he put together. But yeah, the back half of the season where TJ Moore really started coming on, it was special. But I went with Bryant Wesco as well. Defensive breakout player, I think this one's pretty obvious as well, is Sammy Brown. That dude, as advertised, came in physically ready, picked up the defense with no problem, and just absolutely ball. I mean, how many times – I didn't even count. Maybe somebody in the chat knows. How many times did he lead the defense in tackles this season? It had to be like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Maybe more.
And the games where he actually got –
over the back half of the season, he pretty much led the team in tackles every game.
Yeah.
He didn't get a lot of playing time in the front half of the season. But the back half of the season, I mean, the dude led the team in tackles. He led – nope, not going to go there. Nope, I'm leaving it alone.
It's going to rehash some.
You know where I'm going, and I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to leave it there. Sammy Brown is my defensive breakout player of the year.
Yeah, I got to agree. Sammy Brown. If I had to go with somebody else, it would have been Ashton Hampton. But I think Sammy was just every time he played, good things happened.
Yeah, I think Ashton Hampton's a good honorable mention for breakout player. I think that's a good list. Any other highlights or anything you want to point out for the 2024 season before we move on and talk about the upcoming national championship game, Jordan?
Yeah, the third guy I was thinking about on offense was Olsen Pat Henry. I would have he would have been, but he didn't have the stat. I couldn't reward I couldn't reward being a great blocker over over 1,400 yards combined between Wesco and TJ. I just couldn't do that. But he would have been my honorable mention, I guess, second honorable mention.
For sure.